an astonishing Bahrain Grand Prix. I suppose the question on everybody's lips is Aston Martin, customer Mercedes team, blowing away the factory team, obviously. Is there something on the Aston Martin that is a quick fix for everybody else out there? How have they done that? What is it that's making them so quick? And can the other teams quickly take advantage of that?
I think the answer to that is no. I don't think there is. People will point at the side pods and the gullies that we've spoken about quite a bit as maybe the secret to that car's performance, which is really kind of ignoring everything that's going on underneath the car and the way they got the suspension set up. So no, there isn't anything anyone else can really copy quickly to find some performance. And in talking about this online, so many people are now saying, well, Mercedes just need to copy Aston Martin because it's got the same engine, same gearbox, the same rear suspension, aspects of the hubs and the brakes are similar. Why don't they make a car that looks like that? With these things, it's never quite that easy. And equally, I don't think that's the way that Mercedes would go about engineering a car. So I think Aston Martin have baked in a little advantage, certainly for the first part of this season, while everyone else kind of gets themselves sorted out and catches up.
Can you just run us through again what Aston are doing with their pods, and I suppose compare that a little bit with what Red Bull are doing?
Yeah, so Aston have got a strange mix of what you might call Red Bull and Ferrari side pods with a little bit of kind of Williams or Mercedes 2022's side pods thrown in. So you have a fairly conventional inlet at the front, and then the inner part of the side pod ramps down very quickly and meets the floor as soon as the radiators are finished. But you can't really see that because they've got this big shoulder going, Ferrari-like ridge going all the way down to the floor, creating what we've been calling these water slides or gullies down the middle of the side pods. And what this is all about is actually getting the airflow to go down and run over the diffuser and the beam wing and getting it down there as early as possible, so it's not kind of pushed away into other areas like towards the rear wheels or up over that central cooling inlet. How they've achieved that level of ramp is really incredible. I don't know how they keep the air attached to it and get it all to work, but clearly it is working. And, it's just another way of slicing and dicing your side pod shape and volume to drive the rear aero. And it appears to be working quite well. Aston Martin are now using the Mercedes tunnel because there's such a reduced number of hours that teams can use. They've moved into that tunnel, so they're effectively developing the car in the same facility as Mercedes, the factory team, are doing in theirs. A lot of people have pointed towards Dan Fallows, who's been taken in as kind of the overall head of Aston Martin as a group, beyond just the F1, and they're pointing at him being an ex-Red Bull person as one of the keys that has change this direction. And we know Aston Martin have hired lots of Red Bull staff. That's on the record as well. So I think a lot of people are kind of reading a lot into small headlines, but I think it is really just in the fact that the improvement they've made isn't so much in the specific staff, it's in how many resources they've had. Because we've spoken to Andy Green and the people at the team over the years. It's like, what would it take you, when it was Force India Racing Point, to jump ahead? And they just said, the money to do everything they want to do. And now they've got that. And, the Strolls are building this enormous facility, almost like a second McLaren MTC at the Silverstone site, which you see as you drive in. I mean, it's enormous. It's going to be hugely impressive when it opens. And it's just all the money's going in, but the money's being spent in the right places. So I think that's much more of what's going on than particular names and particular faces appearing in the team.
And just to recap, in Bahrain, the impressive thing there was top speed, obviously aero efficiency, and breaking that down, very little sign of bouncing or porpoising. And I say that in the context that we still had some drivers, notably Carlos Sainz at Ferrari and some others, complaining about bouncing still, and yet nothing going on at all at Aston. Incredible efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we saw it sort of through testing that Aston seemed to kind of have this incredible mix of everything, the top speed, the corner speeds, the reliability, the lack of bouncing, and equally the tyre management or the lack of degradation that they had compared to their rivals. We know that Aston, as its various teams under Tom McCulloch, have had fantastic race strategies. They know how to run a set of tyres through a race, and we really saw that in Bahrain when everyone else was, kind of struggling. And yeah, I mean, you look at it and you think, well, where are the chinks in where are the chinks in the armor?
Mm.
Lance Stroll, not to be overly critical, but he had a fantastic race in very difficult circumstances with his wrist, and still, beat a Mercedes. So this is a very good car at this stage in the season, which is that kind of caveat that I keep having to apply to this, so that we don't get too far on the hype train on all of this.
Red Bull, it's even worse than it was last year in some ways, because here they're coming out of a winter where they've had not only being champions, the worst of the budget cap, but they've also had their penalties as well. And they've produced this car despite all that. I mean, what message does that send to everybody else, really? Apart from Aston.
It's really difficult. Last year they had some problems in the early races. The car was overweight. We had those fuel system issues and a few other issues, some Honda issues. This year, there's no evidence of any of that. The car is good everywhere. They were able to run a stint on soft tires that everyone burnt a set of hards through, almost lap for lap. So what does that tell us about the potential in this season? I think the only thing that we can say is that Red Bull potentially are going to lose some performance over the year, because they have, obviously their budget restrictions, and the big one, their aero testing restrictions. So that's the only hope for everyone. But at the moment, I don't feel anyone is within firing range of them to get close enough to, catch them towards the end of the season. So they could potentially coast for the rest of the year, if they feel that Mercedes and Ferrari aren't going to bring the fight to them, and Aston as well, which you would have to argue at this stage is something they would have to consider. So maybe not shaken up for great to be super optimistic for the season, but they've done the job and other people have failed. I mean, I think that's the thing. It's not that they've done a super job, gone above and beyond. They just simply have got the job done. And I think every other team that we've mentioned, out of the 10, all 9 have some kind of an issue which they haven't rectified. So all fares to Red Bull, really.
Yeah, and no signs. I mean, despite all that talk about Adrian Newey taking a back seat and quietening down, yeah, right. There he is on the pit wall, enjoying every millisecond of the weekend.
Maybe now he can have the rest of the year off.
Maybe he can. He's not that sort of guy. I mean, if there were no budget restrictions at all and no penalties on aero testing, whatever, would Red Bull now be looking at the Aston Martin very closely and maybe adopting some features from the Aston? And if that's the case, what would they be, do you think?
Interesting question. Now, I think with Adrian still in charge of the technical side of the team, I would say no, they're not really looking at anything on the Aston. There's a lot of features on the Aston that are quite Red Bullish. You've got, the side pods, and the way that they operate the underfloor are quite different. And Adrian is not someone that really copies. I mean, whenever you see a big trend, often it's a Newey car that's quite late to adopt it. And I can think of a number of things like drum brake ducts and keels and bits and pieces. He was always the last to kind of adopt them. He always uses ideas that he wants to use, and can sometimes be slow to pick up on, maybe it's a rude way of saying it, maybe he doesn't want to pick up on the latest trends, although he's very good at using other people's ideas and converting them. So I don't think there's anything they'd be doing. I think we would say, though, if there was no budget cap, that someone like Mercedes and Ferrari would be looking at spending a lot of money this year in recovering their seasons, which you would say that Mercedes would have done last year if they'd had the opportunity. And now they've had 2 years where they're playing a catch-up game. So, they're learning how to spend that money really carefully.